She cleaned his offices every night, but he never saw her face, until the day she decided to make herself unforgettable. The pre-dawn Atlanta sky painted the city in shades of gray as Mariah Ellis stepped off the bus at Peachtree Plaza. At 28, her days began at 4 a.m. and ended past midnight, a relentless cycle that had become her reality since Jordan's father disappeared 3 years ago. Her worn sneakers made soft sounds against the marble lobby floor of the towering office building where she spent her nights cleaning the offices of people who would never know her name. But Mariah knew theirs. She knew Mr. Peterson in accounting had diabetes from the insulin pens in his desk drawer. She knew Ms. Chen in marketing was getting divorced from the legal papers scattered across her workspace. And she knew Victor Langley, the billionaire who owned half the building, was ruthless from the eviction notices she'd found crumpled in his wastebasket, notices targeting families in her own neighborhood. "Mama, why do we have to get up so early?" Jordan asked, rubbing his sleepy eyes as they walked through the empty corridors. At 6 years old, he was too young to understand why his mother brought him to work during school breaks, too innocent to grasp the weight of their circumstances. "Because this is how we survive, baby," Mariah whispered, unlocking the supply closet with keys that jangled like broken dreams. But one day, things will be different. She had no idea how prophetic those words would prove to be. As the city awakened around them, Mariah moved through the offices like a ghost, emptying trash bins and wiping down surfaces that bore the fingerprints of people who lived in a world she could only observe from the shadows. In Victor Langley's corner office, with its floor-to-ceiling windows and leather furniture worth more than her annual salary, she found something that made her blood run cold. A stack of eviction notices, dozens of them, all targeting low-income families in East Atlanta. Her neighbors. Her friends. People who were already hanging on by threads, about to be cut loose by a man who saw them as nothing more than numbers on a profit sheet. What would you do in this situation? Mariah asked herself, a question that would echo throughout the coming days. She photographed each document with her cracked phone screen, her hands trembling not from fear, but from a growing sense of purpose. By 6 a.m., she was rushing Jordan to school before heading to her second job at the Marlowe Grill, an upscale restaurant where she served people who looked through her as if she were made of air. The irony wasn't lost on her. She spent her nights cleaning the office of the man who would spend his days treating her like she was invisible. "Mama, are you okay?" Jordan asked as she dropped him off at the elementary school, its chain-link fence and cracked sidewalks a stark contrast to the gleaming towers of downtown. Mariah knelt down to his level, straightening his small backpack. "I'm more than okay, baby. I'm getting ready to be brave." She didn't know it yet, but across town, Victor Langley was already planning his day, checking his schedule for a business lunch at the very restaurant where she worked. He had no idea that nobody who cleaned his office was about to become the most important person in his life. The morning sun climbed higher as Mariah walked toward the Marlowe Grill, her uniform pressed and her dignity intact despite everything life had thrown at her. In her apron pocket, her phone contained photos that could topple an empire. In her heart, she carried the quiet strength of a woman who had been underestimated her entire life. Today, that was about to change. The stage was set for a confrontation between two worlds, one built on privilege and power, the other forged in struggle and resilience. Only one of them knew the battle was coming. The moment when arrogance meets dignity, and a billionaire makes the mistake of underestimating the wrong woman. The Marlowe Grill hummed with the energy of Atlanta's elite. Crystal glasses clinked against fine china as deals worth millions were discussed over truffle risotto and aged wine. The restaurant's warm lighting cast everything in a golden glow that seemed to make the wealthy patrons shine brighter, as if their success was literally illuminated. Mariah tied her black apron with practiced efficiency, checking her reflection in the kitchen's stainless steel surfaces. Dark circles under her eyes told a story of her sleepless nights, but her posture remained straight, her smile genuine. She had learned long ago that dignity wasn't something that could be bought or sold, it was something you carried within yourself, regardless of circumstances. "Table 12 is asking for you specifically," said Marcus, the head waiter, sliding past with a tray of champagne flutes. "Some big-shot businessman. Says he wants competent service for once." Mariah's heart skipped. Table 12 was the prime corner booth, reserved for the restaurant's most important guests. She smoothed her uniform and walked across the dining room, navigating between tables where conversations about stock portfolios and vacation homes created a symphony of privilege she would never be part of. And there he was. Victor Langley sat with the commanding presence of a man accustomed to being the most important person in any room. His charcoal suit probably cost more than Mariah made in 3 months, and his steel-gray eyes surveyed the restaurant like a king reviewing his kingdom. 2 other men in similar suits flanked him, investors, by the look of their expensive watches and confident postures. "Good afternoon, gentlemen," Mariah said, her voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. "I'm Mariah, and I'll be taking care of you today." Victor barely glanced up from his phone. "Finally. Do you people understand the concept of urgency? I have actual important things to do today." His words hit like a slap, but Mariah had endured worse. "Of course, sir. What can I start you with?" "Coffee. Real coffee, not that swill you probably serve most people. And make it quick, I don't have time for incompetence." As Mariah walked away, she heard Victor's voice carrying across the restaurant, "You can't find good help anywhere these days. These people think showing up is enough. These people." The phrase burned in her chest, but she channeled that fire into determination. She returned with their coffee service, each cup perfectly prepared, each movement graceful despite the storm building inside her. "Here you are, sir," she said, setting down Victor's cup with steady hands. Victor took a sip and grimaced theatrically. This is what passes for service here. No wonder this city is falling apart, filled with people who can't even handle simple tasks. One of his companions chuckled uncomfortably. "Victor, maybe we should." "Should what?" "Pretend that mediocrity deserves praise." Victor's voice rose slightly, drawing glances from nearby tables. "This is exactly what's wrong with society. People expecting handouts instead of earning their place." Mariah felt every word like a physical blow, but something else was building inside her, not anger, but a crystalline clarity. This was the man who signed those eviction notices, who destroyed families with the casual cruelty of someone swatting flies. This was the man who saw people like her as expendable, invisible, worthless. "Will there be anything else, sir?" she asked, her voice carrying a new undertone that Victor was too arrogant to notice. "Yes. Try not to embarrass yourself further. Some of us actually contribute to society." As Mariah walked away, her mind was already working. In her phone were the photos that could expose his illegal practices. In this room were investors who valued their reputations above everything else. And in just a few hours, the restaurant would host its weekly community outreach program, an event she had helped organize for underprivileged children in the neighborhood. The same children whose families Victor Langley was trying to destroy. The collision of their 2 worlds was just beginning. Sometimes the most dangerous enemies are the ones who smile while they plan your downfall. The afternoon sun slanted through the Marlowe Grill's windows as Mariah went through the motions of her shift, serving other customers with the same grace she had shown Victor Langley. But beneath her professional exterior, her mind was racing. Every time she passed his table, she caught fragments of conversation that made her blood pressure rise. "The East Atlanta properties will be cleared by month's end," Victor was saying to his investors, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. "These people have been living there practically rent-free for years. Time to maximize the potential." Maximize the potential. As if families weren't being destroyed, children weren't being displaced, dreams weren't being crushed under the weight of his greed. Mariah excused herself and stepped into the restaurant's back office, pulling out her phone with trembling hands. The photos she had taken that morning seemed to burn through the screen, document after document proving Victor's illegal eviction practices, his manipulation of housing codes, his deliberate targeting of low-income families who couldn't afford to fight back. "Mrs. Ellis?" The voice belonged to Sarah, a teenager from her neighborhood who worked part-time in the kitchen. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "Something like that," Mariah murmured, then looked at Sarah more closely. "Aren't you supposed to be at school? Half day today." "I came in to help set up for tonight's event." Sarah's face lit up. "My little brother's so excited about the music program. He's been practicing his violin piece for weeks." The music program. Mariah had almost forgotten. Tonight, the Marlowe Grill donated its space for a community outreach event she had helped organize. Local children would perform, some for the first time, in front of an audience that actually saw them as more than statistics or problems to be solved. An idea began to form, dangerous and brilliant in its simplicity. "Sarah," Mariah said slowly, "what time do the children arrive for rehearsal?" "Around 4:30. Why? Mariah glanced at the dining room, where Victor was still holding court with his investors, completely unaware that his words were being overheard by the very people he was discussing like commodities. No reason. Just wanted to make sure everything goes smoothly. She returned to her tables, but now every movement had purpose. She began positioning herself strategically, always within earshot when Victor spoke, documenting not just his written crimes but his casual cruelty, his dismissive attitude toward the communities he was destroying. The beauty of this approach, Victor was explaining to a potential investor, is that these people don't have the resources to fight back. They'll take whatever settlement we offer, if they're smart. Mariah's hands clenched around her serving tray. These people. Always these people, as if an entire community of hard-working families could be reduced to two dismissive words. At 4:30, the restaurant's atmosphere began to shift. Children started arriving through the back entrance, some carrying instruments, others clutching sheet music, all of them bright-eyed with the nervous excitement of young performers. These were the children from her neighborhood, the ones whose families Victor Langley was systematically displacing. Little Marcus from apartment 3B, whose grandmother was facing eviction next week. Aisha from the corner house, whose mother worked 3 jobs and still might lose their home. Carlos, whose family had lived in the same apartment for 15 years until Victor's company bought the building. They were all here, preparing to perform, completely unaware that the man responsible for their family's struggles was sitting 30 feet away, discussing their destruction over dessert and coffee. Mariah pulled out her phone again, this time opening her live stream app. She had started the account months ago to document community events, never imagining it would become a weapon for justice. The storm was gathering, and Victor Langley had no idea he was about to be caught in the eye of it. The children's voices drifted from the back room as they warmed up, their innocent melodies a stark contrast to the cold calculations happening in the dining room. Soon, those two worlds would collide in a way that would change everything. The storm is brewing, and Victor Langley has no idea he's about to walk into a trap 6 months in the making. While he casually discusses destroying families over dinner, those same families are about to watch him destroy himself on live stream. But here's what I want to know: if you had evidence that could expose a corrupt billionaire, would you have the courage to use it knowing it could cost you everything? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you're invested in seeing justice served, smash that subscribe button because the confrontation you've been waiting for is about to explode in ways you never expected. When courage meets opportunity, ordinary people can do extraordinary things. The back room of the Marlowe Grill had been transformed. Folding chairs arranged in neat rows faced a small makeshift stage where local children would soon perform for family members and community supporters. The warm lighting softened everything, creating an atmosphere of hope and possibility that stood in stark contrast to the cold business discussions happening in the main dining room. Mariah stood at the doorway between the two spaces, literally and figuratively positioned between two worlds. On one side, Victor Langley continued his dinner meeting, oblivious to the gathering storm. On the other, children from the neighborhood he was systematically destroying prepared to share their talents with anyone willing to listen. "Mrs. Ellis," whispered Jamie, a 10-year-old girl clutching a worn violin case. "I'm nervous. What if I mess up?" Mariah knelt to Jamie's level, straightening the child's collar with gentle hands. "You know what I've learned, sweetheart. Sometimes the most important thing isn't playing perfectly. Sometimes it's about making sure the right people hear your song." The words carried more weight than Jamie could understand, but Mariah felt their truth resonate in her chest. Tonight wasn't just about a children's recital anymore, it was about making Victor Langley hear the voices of the people he was silencing. Her phone buzzed with a text from her neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez. "Mariah, they delivered the eviction notice today. 30 days. I don't know what we're going to do. 30 days. 1 month for a family to find new housing in a market that Victor and people like him had made impossible for working-class families to navigate." Mariah's resolve crystallized. She opened her live stream app, titling the broadcast simply, "Community Music Night, Everyone Welcome." Within minutes, neighbors and friends began joining the stream, their comments full of hearts and encouragement for the children. At exactly 6 p.m., as the first child took the stage with a nervous smile and a recorder, Mariah made her move. She positioned herself where she could see both rooms, where her phone could capture audio from Victor's table while streaming the children's performance to her growing online audience. "Ladies and gentlemen," Victor's voice carried clearly as he addressed his investors, completely unaware that his words were being broadcast live to dozens of people from the very community he was discussing. The East Atlanta acquisition represents a unique opportunity. These low-income tenants have been essentially squatting on prime real estate for years. In the back room, 8-year-old Marcus began playing a simple melody on his keyboard, the same child whose grandmother was facing eviction next week. The contrast was devastating, innocence and talent being celebrated in one room while being dismissed and destroyed in the other. The live stream comments began to multiply rapidly. "Wait, is that Victor Langley from Langley Properties? He's the one trying to evict my sister's family. Someone record this. This is the proof we needed." Mariah's heart pounded as she realized what was happening. Her small community live stream was being shared, viewed, and recorded by people who understood exactly what they were witnessing. Victor's casual cruelty was being exposed in real time to the very people he was victimizing. "The beauty of the current housing market," Victor continued, cutting into his dessert with the same precision he used to cut families from their homes, "is that these people have nowhere else to go. They'll accept any settlement rather than fight a legal battle they can't afford." Behind him, visible through the doorway, little Aisha stepped up to the microphone to recite a poem about home, about belonging, about the apartment she might lose next month. The viewers' count on Mariah's stream climbed past 100, then 200. Local news outlets were being tagged. Community leaders were being messaged. A digital wildfire was spreading, fueled by the stark contrast between Victor's callous words and the children's hopeful performances. Mariah felt something shift in the air, like the moment before lightning strikes. The moment of truth had arrived, and Victor Langley still had no idea he was about to become the star of his own downfall. Most powerful performances aren't always on stage, sometimes they happen when truth collides with power. The dining room had begun to empty as the evening wound down, but Victor Langley and his investors showed no signs of leaving. Their conversation had grown more animated, more specific, more incriminating with each passing minute. Mariah's livestream now had over 500 viewers, and the comments section was exploding with recognition, outrage, and calls for action. "Are we recording this? Someone please tell me this is being saved. That's my landlord. That's the man trying to evict us. Share this everywhere." In the performance space, the children continued their recital, unaware that they had become part of something much larger than a simple community event. Their innocent voices carried through the restaurant, a soundtrack of hope that made Victor's cruel calculations even more jarring. Mariah moved closer to his table, refilling water glasses with steady hands while her phone, propped discreetly against a service station, captured every word. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her movements remained professional, invisible, exactly what had allowed her to overhear so much in the first place. "The Rodriguez family in Unit 4B, Victor was saying, consulting papers spread across the table like battle plans. Single mother, works 2 jobs, behind on rent by exactly 3 days each month. Perfect candidate for acceleration. Mrs. Rodriguez. Mariah's neighbor, the woman who had helped watch Jordan when Mariah worked late shifts. The woman who baked birthday cakes for children in their building when their parents couldn't afford store-bought ones. The woman who had texted about her eviction notice just an hour ago. Acceleration, one of the investors asked. Expedited eviction process, Victor explained with a smile that never reached his eyes. We file on day 4 instead of waiting for the standard 30-day grace period. Technically legal, completely effective. These people never expected. The livestream comments were coming so fast now that Mariah could barely read them. Someone call the news. This is illegal in Georgia. My lawyer needs to see this. How do we stop him? Behind the growing fury of the digital audience, 10-year-old Carlos stepped up to perform a song he had written himself, a simple melody about wanting to stay in the only home he had ever known. The irony was so sharp it could cut glass, the child singing about home while the man destroying homes sat 20 feet away, planning the next family to displace. Victor's phone rang, interrupting his detailed explanation of how to maximize profits while minimizing legal liability. He answered with the impatient bark of someone accustomed to being the most important person in any conversation. Langley. What do you mean, trending? On what platform? Mariah's blood turned to ice. Someone had recognized Victor from the live stream, and word was already reaching his inner circle. She had minutes, maybe less, before he realized what was happening. She stepped forward, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. Excuse me, Mr. Langley. Is everything all right? Victor looked up, really seeing her for the first time all evening. You're the waitress from earlier. Yes, sir. Mariah Ellis. She let her name hang in the air, watching for any flicker of recognition. Nothing, she was still invisible to him, still just another face in his personal service industry. Well, Mariah Ellis, Victor said, standing and throwing his napkin on the table with theatrical disgust, you can tell your management that their establishment has been thoroughly disappointing. The service, the atmosphere, and especially the noise from whatever charity case performance is happening back there. The charity case performance. The children from the families he was destroying, dismissed with the same casual cruelty he had shown all evening. Mariah smiled, and for the first time, there was something dangerous in her expression. Actually, Mr. Langley, I think you're about to find the evening much more memorable than you expected. The performance of a lifetime was about to begin, and this time, Victor Langley would be center stage. This is the moment everything changes, when an invisible woman steps into the light and a billionaire realizes he's been performing for the wrong audience all along. But here's my question for you, when you see injustice happening right in front of you, do you speak up or stay silent? Mariah is about to make a choice that will either save her community or destroy her life, and honestly, I'm getting chills just thinking about what happens next. If you're as invested in this story as I am, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because the next chapter is where this billionaire's world comes crashing down in the most satisfying way possible. The moment when the invisible woman decides to be seen, and a billionaire learns that some people can't be bought, silenced, or ignored. The restaurant fell silent except for the soft melody drifting from the back room, where young voices continued their performance, unaware that their innocence was about to collide with a reckoning years in the making. Victor Langley stood by his table, phone pressed to his ear, his face cycling through confusion, irritation, and the first flickers of something that might have been concern. What do you mean, viral? He snapped into the phone. I'm at a business dinner, not some social media circus. Mariah pulled out her phone, the live stream still running, the viewer count now approaching 2,000. Local news outlets were being tagged in the comments. Community organizers were sharing the stream across every platform they could access. The digital wildfire she had started was now beyond anyone's ability to control. Mr. Langley, she said, her voice carrying across the nearly empty dining room with startling clarity. I think you should know that everything you've said tonight has been heard by the people you've been discussing. Victor lowered his phone, his gray eyes focusing on her with the first hint of actual attention he had paid all evening. What are you talking about? The Rodriguez family in Unit 4B. The Anderson family facing acceleration. The dozens of other families you've been systematically displacing. Mariah stepped closer, her phone held steady, still streaming. They're all listening right now. One of Victor's investors shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Victor, what is she talking about? Mrs. Rodriguez, Mariah said, speaking directly to her phone's camera, knowing her neighbor was watching. He just told his investors that you're a perfect candidate for acceleration because you're 3 days behind on rent. He's planning to file eviction papers on day 4 instead of giving you the legal 30-day grace period. The live stream exploded with comments. That's illegal. We're calling our lawyers now. Someone record everything. Don't let him leave. Victor's face was shifting through shades of red and white as the implications hit him. You can't, this is a private conversation. You're illegally recording. Actually, Mariah said, her voice steady as steel, Georgia is a one-party consent state for recording. As long as one person in the conversation consents, and I do, everything you've said tonight is perfectly legal to record and share. She had learned that fact during the long nights of research, preparing for this moment she had hoped would never come but knew inevitably would. Knowledge was power, and she had armed herself with every weapon she could find. Besides, she continued, you weren't exactly whispering. Your conversation was loud enough to be heard throughout the restaurant. No expectation of privacy. The live stream count hit 3,000 viewers. Local news stations were now in the comments, asking for contact information. Community leaders were organizing response meetings in real time. The story was writing itself, spreading across social media faster than Victor's expensive lawyers would ever be able to contain it. You have no idea who you're dealing with, Victor snarled, his carefully maintained veneer of sophistication cracking to reveal something ugly underneath. I own half this city. I can destroy you. Mariah smiled, and in that expression was years of struggle, dignity maintained despite impossible circumstances, and the quiet power of someone who had finally found her voice. "Mr. Langley," she said, "you've been trying to destroy my community for months. You've been trying to destroy families, children, futures. But you made one crucial mistake." "What mistake?" Victor demanded, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "You thought we were invisible. You thought we wouldn't fight back. You thought we didn't matter." Mariah's voice rose, carrying to every corner of the restaurant, to every viewer on the stream, to every person who had ever been dismissed as nobody by someone with power. "But we do matter. We have voices. And tonight, the whole world is listening." The reckoning had begun, and there was no stopping it now. When the foundation of lies crumbles, even the mightiest towers fall. The Marlowe Grill had become the epicenter of a digital earthquake. Mariah's live stream, which had started as a simple community event, now had over 10,000 viewers and was being shared across every social media platform. Local news vans were already pulling up outside, their bright lights cutting through the evening darkness like searchlights hunting prey. Victor Langley stood frozen in the center of the restaurant, his expensive suit suddenly looking like armor that had failed to protect him. His phone rang constantly, investors, lawyers, public relations specialists, all demanding explanations for the viral video that was destroying his carefully crafted reputation in real time. "This is Martha Hendricks from Channel 5 News," a voice called from the entrance as a reporter and camera crew pushed through the doors. "We're looking for the woman who exposed the Langley Properties scandal." Mariah felt a moment of vertigo. 6 hours ago, she had been invisible, just another service worker moving through the shadows of other people's lives. Now she was at the center of a story that was reshaping the city's conversation about housing, justice, and the power of ordinary people to demand accountability. "You've destroyed everything," Victor hissed, moving closer to her with a desperation that had replaced his earlier arrogance. "Do you understand what you've done? How many jobs will be lost? How many projects will be cancelled? How many families will keep their homes?" Mariah countered, her voice steady despite the chaos swirling around them. "How many children won't have to change schools? How many communities won't be scattered to the winds for your profit margins?" The live stream comments were a river of support, anger, and action. "Legal aid office is opening emergency hours. Tenant rights lawyers mobilizing. City council calling emergency session. FBI needs to investigate this. Mariah is a hero." In the background, the children's recital continued, their voices now serving as a powerful counterpoint to the adult drama playing out in the dining room. Young Carlos was singing his song about home while reporters interviewed community members about Victor's illegal practices. Little Jamie played her violin while lawyers in the comments section offered pro bono services to affected families. Victor's lead investor stood abruptly, gathering his papers. "I'm out. Langley, this association is toxic now." "So are we," said the second investor, already dialing his phone. "My reputation can't survive connection to this." One by one, Victor's carefully cultivated business relationships evaporated in real time. Decades of networking, of building influence and amassing power, dissolved under the bright lights of public scrutiny. Mariah's phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. She answered cautiously. "Ms. Ellis? This is Attorney General Sarah Martinez's office. The Attorney General would like to speak with you about testifying in a formal investigation into Langley Properties business practices." Testifying. The word sent a thrill of fear and determination through her chest. This was bigger than she had imagined, bigger than a viral video or even local news coverage. This was about systematic change, about justice on a scale she had never dared dream possible. "Yes," she said, her voice carrying across the restaurant to where Victor stood, his face gray with the realization of what was coming. "I'll testify. I have documentation, recordings, witness statements. Everything you need." Victor's phone rang again, and this time his face went completely white as he answered. "Mr. Langley," a reporter called out, "how do you respond to allegations that Langley Properties has engaged in systematic housing discrimination and illegal eviction practices?" Victor looked around the restaurant, at the news cameras, at the live stream still broadcasting to thousands of viewers, at Mariah standing calm and resolute in the center of it all, and for the first time in his life, he had no answer. His empire wasn't just collapsing. It was being demolished brick by the very people he had tried to make invisible. And the whole world was watching. 6 months later, the invisible woman had become unforgettable, and the man who thought he owned the city discovered that some things can't be bought. The Atlanta Community Justice Center stood where an abandoned lot had been just months before. Its bright walls were covered with murals painted by local children, and its windows overlooked a neighborhood that had been saved from displacement through unprecedented community organizing and legal intervention. Mariah Ellis stood in the center's main room, watching as Jordan carefully arranged sheet music on piano stands for the afternoon's music lesson. At 7 years old now, her son moved with the confidence of a child who had seen his mother change the world and understood that ordinary people could do extraordinary things. "Mama," Jordan said, looking up from his task, "Mrs. Rodriguez says the man who tried to take her apartment is going to jail. Is that true?" Mariah smiled, remembering the morning 3 months ago when Victor Langley had been led away in handcuffs, charged with fraud, housing discrimination, and racketeering. The investigation that had begun with her live stream had uncovered a web of corruption that stretched far beyond illegal evictions, revealing bribery, tax evasion, and systematic exploitation that had been hidden for years behind expensive lawyers and political connections. "Yes, baby, he's going to jail for a very long time." "Good," Jordan said with the simple moral clarity of childhood. "He was mean to people." The center's front door opened, bringing a burst of autumn air and the sound of children's voices. The afternoon program was starting: music lessons, homework help, art classes, and computer training, all free for neighborhood families. The funding had come from an unexpected source: the liquidation of Victor Langley's assets, which had been redistributed to the communities he had harmed through a landmark legal settlement. Mariah walked to the window and looked out at the street where she had once waited for buses at 4 a.m., exhausted from cleaning office buildings where men like Victor Langley made decisions about other people's lives. The same street was bustling now with community activities, with children walking safely to after-school programs, with families who no longer lived in fear of losing their homes. Her phone buzzed with a message from a producer at Netflix: documentary about the Langley case moving forward. Still interested in consulting? 3 book offers, 2 documentary proposals, and dozens of speaking requests had arrived since the story went national. Mariah had turned down most of them, accepting only opportunities that would benefit the community center or support similar justice efforts in other cities. Mrs. Ellis called Sarah, the teenager who had been working in the Marlowe Grill's kitchen that fateful night. She was a college freshman now, her tuition paid by a scholarship fund that had emerged from the community's legal victory. "The Evening News wants to do a follow-up story about the center. Are you available for an interview?" "Of course," Mariah said, then paused. "But let's make sure they interview the families who stayed in their homes, the children who didn't have to change schools, the community members who organized the legal fund." This was never about just one person. As the afternoon progressed, the center filled with the sounds of learning and laughter. Children who might have been scattered across the city by forced displacement instead sat together, practicing instruments, working on homework, dreaming about futures that no longer seemed impossible. At closing time, as the last family headed home, Mariah stood alone in the quiet center. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. There were always more Victor Langleys in the world, always more communities under threat, always more battles to fight. But tonight, she allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The invisible woman had made herself seen. The voiceless had found her voice. The powerless had discovered that the greatest power of all was the courage to stand up and say, "This is wrong, and it stops here." Jordan appeared at her side, slipping his small hand into hers. "Ready to go home, Mama?" Mariah squeezed his hand and smiled. "Yes, baby. Let's go home." Outside, the neighborhood hummed with the quiet contentment of a community that had fought for itself and won. And in the distance, the city lights twinkled like stars, no longer cold and unreachable, but warm with the promise that justice, once awakened, never truly sleeps. 6 months later, the invisible woman became a legend, and the man who thought he owned everything learned that some victories can't be bought, stolen, or silenced. But this isn't just Mariah's story. It's proof that every single one of us has the power to create change when we find our voice and refuse to stay quiet. So tell me in the comments, what injustice in your community would you stand up to if you had the courage? And if this story of triumph over corruption inspired you to believe that ordinary people can do extraordinary things, subscribe to this channel because there are more stories like this that need to be told, stories where the underdog wins and justice actually gets served. The invisible woman had written her own ending after all.